The Lights Beneath Svalbard, Episode 4, The Collapse Event. The deeper I read into the material from Station K31, the more I realized something. Whatever happened there wasn't a single catastrophic event, but a long, drawn-out negotiation between curiosity and fear. The staff knew something was wrong. They knew it for weeks before anything physically collapsed. But as with so many cases, the real collapse began long before the structure failed. It began when people stopped trusting what their own senses were telling them. The file set relating to what was later called the collapse event was scattered across multiple formats. Partial reels of recorded announcements, fragments of maintenance logs, incident reports that had been partially shredded and then taped back together by someone desperate to reconstruct a narrative. None of this came from me, of course. I wasn't even aware of K31 when it was active. Everything I'm about to recount is pieced together from the documents that were pushed into my world after the fact by people who apparently couldn't live with what they knew. One of the clearest sources was an internal incident report labeled K31/Event C09. Subject: Structural Anomaly, Lower Shaft and Primary Supports. The report began clinically enough. It described a localized deformation detected along one of the major support pillars near the lower shaft access. The deformation was not caused by temperature fluctuation or known geological activity. Instead, the support column appeared to be bending, as though something was pushing against it from within the surrounding ice. The engineer on duty, identified only as THANSEN, logged the following observations. Noted gradual warping of metal brace at shaft segment B3. No sign of impact. Warping appears uniform along its vertical length. Under normal circumstances, such a finding would have triggered an immediate evacuation of the affected area. But K31's mission, to study the seismic and subsurface anomalies, made its leadership reluctant to abandon proximity to the very phenomenon they were being paid to observe. Later, annotations in the margin confirmed this. Recommendation to temporarily seal lower shaft access was overruled by oversight. Priority placed on continued data collection. Beneath that line, someone with a different pen, perhaps later, had written a single word: cowards. The logs indicated that the support issue was first noted 5 days before the collapse event in its full form. During those 5 days, several other anomalies were recorded. The first came from the station's internal environmental sensors. Air pressure in certain corridors began fluctuating slightly, not enough to cause physical harm, but enough that staff complained of ear popping and a constant feeling of descending in an airplane cabin. These fluctuations did not match any external weather pattern. They were happening underground, in sealed spaces, as though the pressure inside the station itself were being subtly manipulated. The second anomaly involved sound. Several technicians filed nearly identical notes. Audible low-frequency resonance in sleeping quarters. Source unknown. Humming persists even after power reduction to non-essential systems. Sound seems stronger near lower shaft entrance. One note from a medic added, increased reports of insomnia, nightmares, and anxiety. Some staff claim to hear knocking patterns in the middle of the night. No corresponding mechanical source identified. Knocking again. But now, not only through the lower shaft, it was traveling into their living spaces. I turned to the next set of documents, a sequence of maintenance logs and security alerts generated over a 36-hour window leading up to the collapse event. Each log captured a single moment in a slow-motion disaster. At 3:12, a structural sensor at support point F2 registered a minor shift. Within tolerance, the system flagged, but nudged upward from previous readings. At 5:48, the same sensor reported a slightly stronger deviation. By 9:23, 3 different supports, all located along the same side of the lower shaft, registered coordinated stress increases. A technician wrote, "Pattern suggests outward pressure, as if something below is pushing horizontally rather than vertically. No tremors recorded topside to explain this." That phrasing, "as if something below is pushing," appeared in multiple logs. The staff were trying to stay objective, but their fear was leaking through. The most revealing account, however, came from a transcript of a staff meeting held in the observation room the day before the collapse event. The meeting had been recorded automatically by the station system. The logs indicated that someone later tried to delete it, but only succeeded in corrupting parts of the file. Enough remained. The meeting begins with the station lead, identified in earlier documents as Dr. Eric Lindstrom. "We have 3 separate issues that might be connected: structural deformation at B3, pressure anomalies, and the amplified pattern behavior during night cycle 32. We cannot treat these as isolated incidents anymore." A younger voice, possibly one of the seismic analysts, responded, "The entity, or whatever we're measuring, has changed its behavior. We used to have to prompt it. Now it initiates. It's anticipating our observation windows. That's not environmental noise." Another voice, firm, "We are not using the word entity in official reports." The exchange continued for several minutes, hovering between scientific caution and unspoken dread. Finally, a different technician spoke up, her voice shaking slightly. "I woke up last night and I knew it was below me. Not abstractly, not I'm on top of a shaft. I felt it down there, like when someone is standing in the hallway outside your door and you know they're listening. That's not just stress." There was a long pause on the recording. Then Dr. Lindstrom again, "We don't have the authority to abandon, you know that. We can request intervention, but until command approves anything, we maintain operations." Someone muttered, "At least log that we asked." The meeting ended without resolution. According to the timeline, the collapse event began less than 24 hours later. I moved to the dedicated incident log. The first entry was marked with a time stamp, 0117. Alert, localized tremor detected at lower shaft segment C1. Magnitude low, duration 3.2 seconds. All systems nominal. At 1:34, alert, repeated tremor at C1 and B3. Harmonic pattern observed. Audible vibration detected in corridors near observation wing. A short, terse note was appended by a human operator. "This doesn't feel like natural tremor. Pattern is too clean." By 1:51, the logs became more urgent. Priority alert. Seismic resonance building at lower shaft. Readings do not match known glacial movements. Vertical impulses increasing. Recommend staff clear non-essential personnel from lower access. That recommendation for once was followed. Several staff were moved away from the shaft and into the upper dormitories. But crucially, the observation team remained. Their job was to watch, and they did. The audio from the observation room that night is difficult to listen to for long, not because of any one dramatic moment, but because of the slow, relentless escalation of the sound. It begins with the now familiar hum, then the pulses. Not the orderly test patterns of earlier nights, but rapid, irregular bursts, like someone knocking frantically on multiple doors at once. The seismic graphs translated these into jagged spikes, dancing wildly across the display. One technician whispers, "It's not trying to talk to us anymore, it's just beating on the walls." The hum deepens. A metallic creak is heard. Thin at first, then louder. Something is bending. A voice on the recording. "Support readings at B3 are out of tolerance. It's shifting. We need to shut down and seal the shaft." Then a sharp, peculiar sound. Not the crack of brittle ice, but something like a long, low groan. The sound of a huge structure protesting under strain. An alarm begins to wail. "System alert. Structural compromise detected at lower shaft segment B3. Evacuate vicinity. Evacuate vicinity." The observation room erupts into overlapping voices. "Shut the lower gates." "Is the elevator platform still down there?" "We've got crew near B3. The logs later confirmed that a small maintenance team had been inspecting part of the lower shaft when the deformations worsened. Their radio tags appeared briefly on the location grid, then winked out all at once. The official incident report claimed communication failure. The raw logs tell a different story. For a brief moment, seismic sensors recorded a sharp, localized spike at the exact depth where the team had been working. Immediately afterward, the structural diagrams updated with a gap. What had once been a contiguous shaft was now marked as void expansion. The phrase used in the engineer's summary was clinical. Section of ice and surrounding support structure appears to have been displaced inward by unknown force. Displaced inward. As if something had swallowed a section of the shaft. The observation audio continues. Someone shouts that they've lost contact with the maintenance crew. Another insists they must reopen the lower gate to send a rescue team. A third person, voice nearly breaking, says, "There is nothing to rescue. Look at the readings. There's nothing left down there." Moments later, there's a heavy impact sound, followed by a shuddering series of smaller cracks. Dust falls from the ceiling. The alarm changes tone. System alert. Progressive structural failure in lower shaft. Recommend immediate full station evacuation. It is at this point that most rational organizations would have triggered an emergency shutdown and escape protocol. But K-31's chain of command was not rational that night. Instead, the next recorded directive, relayed over the station's comms system, was secure all critical data, seal non-essential sectors. Observation team remains until we determine stability. Evacuation authorization pending. Pending, while the supports buckled. In the station medic's later testimony, filed after what little of the crew made it back topside, there is a haunting description of what happened next in the sleeping quarters. He wrote, "Even before the physical shaking reached us, we heard it, a deep, slow rhythm, traveling through the beds, the walls, even through our bodies, like being inside a drum. It wasn't just the ice moving, it was coordinated, intentional. Those not already awake snapped upright. Some described a sense of pressure on their chests, as though something massive was passing beneath them. Others reported a sensation of being tilted, despite the floor remaining level. At 2:06, an entire section of the lower shaft collapsed. Or perhaps it would be more accurate to say it reconfigured. The seismic map from that moment is unlike anything I've seen in normal geological records. The pulses shift from chaotic spikes into a series of steady, powerful beats. Beat, pause, beat, pause. Someone in the observation room murmurs, "It looks like a heartbeat." The graphs support this. The pattern settles into a regular, almost biological rhythm, a slow thump followed by a smaller echo. The amplitude is enormous. Whatever was moving within the ice was exerting forces that should have shattered the station completely. But it didn't, not yet. It was feeling its way around. A note added to the incident summary by Dr. Lindstrom reads, "There is no natural model for what we are seeing. The ice is not just cracking, it is rearranging. Mass is shifting laterally and vertically in coordinated ways. If I didn't know better, I would say the medium itself is being used like muscle. Like muscle. An unnatural anatomy of permafrost and pressure. As the collapse event progressed, corridors began to tilt, doors jammed. Fine fractures crawled along the walls like spiderwebs. Lights flickered and went dark. People tried to move toward designated safe zones, but those zones were based on earlier structural maps. Maps that no longer applied to whatever K-31 had become. One particularly chilling log entry came from a panicked radio transmission, preserved only in part. "Can't get through the floors. It's pushed up like a wave. No, it's solid. It froze that way. We just saw it move, and then it was ice again. The recording cuts with a burst of static. At 2:19, the station finally received the authorization it needed. Priority message. Evacuation approved. All personnel to proceed to upper exit immediately. Observation operations terminated." Terminated. But the observation team didn't leave right away. The last camera feed I received, taken from the main observation room, shows them standing there for several seconds longer than protocol allowed, watching the seismic graph, watching the heartbeat. It had slowed, not stopped, just slowed, as if whatever was beneath them had exerted tremendous force and was now resting, recovering, thinking. The last recorded line of audio before they shut everything down came from someone whose identity I couldn't confirm. The voice was barely above a whisper. "It knows we're leaving." Then the screen went black.